Jordan's keeping bees alive. You know, when you go into your hive, you guys are gonna get tired of this. Hopefully this has sunk in a little bit. There's 4 things going on in the hive: bees, brood, food, disease, right? That's all that's going on. And when you go into your hive or you don't go into your hive, this is what you should be thinking about. You know, do I have bees in there? And the management decision is match the hive size to the colony size. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But that's relevant for the winter too, right? That's relevant all year long. It's especially relevant for the winter because the cluster size in the winter can vary, right? Your cluster size going into the winter could be 3 frames of bees or it could be a whole box full of bees. And some of that depends on how you've managed your bees through the season. But there's always a range of the number of bees. And surely at this time of year, we're kind of close to the nadir, right? So we have our winter bees produced over the last month or two, and they're the bees that are going to carry you through the winter. Your cluster size may drift a little bit, you know, over the next month or two as it gets cold and some of the bees die off. But where you are today is kind of close to where you're going to be in February when the bees start to make new bees and you get new bee turnover. So you get your winter bee death and your new bees turning over. But you may drift slowly down over the next month or two on bee population. And anything is okay. You know, you could have 3 frames of bees or you could have a box full of bees. It's all okay. But you do kind of want, you're hopefully not going to have 2 frames of bees in a giant hive, and you're hopefully not going to have 10 frames of bees in a nuke box, right? Because that's going to be an issue. Brood, all the hives at Cheslin, all the nukes at Cheslin, all my personal hives are broodless at this point. I saw no cap brood even 2 weeks ago. It all hatched, and to me that seemed early, but I think that's okay. You know, the winter bees are done. There's no forage coming in. There's nothing out there blooming. So the queen and the bees have decided that they're done, and there's no more brood. I do see some. Actually, I have seen brood in a few hives, and I almost think it's abnormal to see late brood. Sometimes when you see late brood, it's a sign that they don't have enough bees in the population. They're trying to boost that population, or sometimes that population is sick. And somehow they know the population's dying off. And again, they're trying to make some bees late and there's brood. The other time when there may be brood is if for some reason you had a supersede your queen or you lost the queen late in the season and now you have a new queen. For some reason, those new queens, when they start laying, sometimes overdo it, honestly, and they lay a lot. And that may be a reason why you see brood. But if you don't see brood, you're not queenless. I had a discussion with somebody who thought they were queenless because they went into the hive and saw no brood a week ago. I said, no, you're probably okay. You know, I mean, that's probably okay right now not to have brood. Now, with that said, some of that depends on your management, right? If you've been feeding bees for a bit, maybe that stimulated the colony to have some brood. But most of us are broodless, I think. Food is a big issue this time of year as far as winter. You're kind of running today. Maybe I'm going to try to. I have some light highs. That's another story that none of you want to hear about. But you know, the window is closing to feed syrup quickly. I'm going to put some syrup on today because I still think it's warm enough and I think they can dry it out pretty quick. But soon, once the daytime temperatures are in the 50s and the nighttime temperatures are freezing, you can't add any more syrup to the hive. So you got to either hope they're heavy enough or add some solid food like fondant on your hives. And then disease. Colonies die in winter for 2 reasons, basically, right? They either run out of food or they have too much disease. And that's why you lose colonies. There's really nothing to do. Well, the last thing we do is in December, probably at the holiday party, we'll have oxalic solution available, or maybe we'll have oxalic powder available. I'm not sure yet what we're going to do, but we all do the dribble or the vaporization in December, right? Because there's no more brood in the hive. All the hives are broodless. All the mites are on the bees. So in December, we use that opportunity to really knock down the mites so that they come out of winter basically as mite-free as possible. Right, so this last mite treatment is always when they're broodless. Now, some of you can do it now if you want, but generally the club does it in December, where we do the oxalic treatment as the last mite treatment to deal with disease. If your hive dies before the new year, it probably dies of disease. If your hive dies after the new year, it probably dies of starvation. We have no idea what this winter is going to be like. Historically, in this neck of the woods, it's been about 30% winter loss. I think as a club, we generally do better because people are here getting educated and know about food and know about disease and know about hive management. If you lose hives, it's not because you're a bad beekeeper, honestly. It may be, but not necessarily. if you lose bees, I would say, you know, you have to decide if you want to restart next year. And if you want to restart next year, commit to your ongoing education, right? Everyone figures this out. Even Mark figures this out, right? So, Mark lost bees for 5 years, and then he finally 4 years. Sorry, Mark bought bees every spring for 4 years in a row, and he finally figured it out. And now he doesn't lose bees anymore. So usually, at some point you figure it out that you're able to continue if you want to. Next slide. Okay. So this is my diversion into my craziness of my brain. So what can overwinter? So on the left is everything that you can overwinter. So and it's all almost correct, right? So you're gonna have people that overwinter and all these configurations, and they all do it successfully, right? So I assume everybody who's here probably has one of these configurations. You can overwinter in a double deep. George Watman, chairman of the board, is overwintering double deeps. Who else is overwintering double deep? Raise your hand. So a bunch. So that's traditional, right? The traditional teaching is a double deep to overwinter. You basically have 2 deeps. Your 1 deep is full of resources or food, so you at least have 80 pounds of honey on the hive, and you overwinter in a double deep. Deep and a medium. How many people are overwintering in that configuration? So there's a bunch of people that are deeps and the mediums. So you basically have your deep, and then you have your 30 pounds in your medium. The only challenge for the deep and the medium is they come up into the medium in the spring, and now you got brood in your medium. And what do you do with that? Not a big deal, but it is. And it's a safe way to overwinter because you're going to generally have enough food. You don't have to worry about them running out of food.
So we have a deep, medium, and we bought a feeding shed.
Mm-hmm.
Do we put that on and leave it on for the duration, or
we'll talk about that. But good thought.
And then we saw something else because I think what we thought we were going to get something that had a mesh at the bottom, mm-hmm. but it just came as a spacer because we didn't realize they just put the bonnet right on top of the frames. But now I've seen something else. I think they called it a quilting box, and people are putting pieces of burlap in there for moisture, so that would make even more height. But we're a bit of dead space, so we're kind of worried about stacking.
Oh, it's all good. So you can use no shim, you can use a shim, you can use a shim with a screen on the bottom, you can put nothing in your shim, you can put burlap and wood chips in your shim, it's all good. Okay. Just like everything on the left is all good. How many people are overwintering in a single deep? We got a few out there. Yeah, so single deep is how I overwinter now. Everything goes into a single. You do have a little bit of anxiety that they may run out of food because they're all in a single. For the medium people out there, who run mediums, which is a grand idea, honestly, because you're dealing with less weight. The equivalent is 3 mediums or 2 mediums, whether or not you're equivalent to a double deep or a single deep would be 3 and 2 mediums. How many people run all medium boxes? So we're all split, right? It's kind of cool. Like there's like this group. Running all mediums make a little bit of sense, right? You just have more frames to look at, but you're dealing with lighter boxes. How many people are overwintering in double 5-frame nukes? Bunch of us, right? So this is how we overwinter at Cheslin with the apprentice nukes. We overwinter in double 5 frames. We've been doing that for years, having a 90%, 80 to 90% overwintering success. So you can definitely overwinter with 2 5-frames on top of each other.
Is it 2 5-frame deeps?
2 5-frame deeps.
Then overwintered in 2 5-frame mediums.
Well, then you're doing the equivalent of a single 5-frame deep. So how many people are overwintering in a single 5-frame deep? Charlie, raise your hand. The Queen team. Ed is doing that. So the Queen team has all their boxes, all their bees in a single 5-frame deep this year. And last year, right? Last year they were all 5-frame. And what percent overwintered last year? 80? 70. 70? So single 5-frame boxes, 70% overwintered. So that's possible. Anyone overwintering in a single 3-frame nuke? Does that work? Does that work?
It does.
It does work. Ish.
40%-ish.
40%-ish. So that's about as small as I know of anybody overwintering. Is anybody overwintering in 2 frames? Split nukes, 2-framers? No.
Accepted.
Anyone overwintering in 1 frame?
I just want to bring them inside at that point.
Yeah, does anyone have a box of bees underneath their pillow?
I've got an observation hive with 4D frames.
With 4D frames. Well,
Yeah.
that's a single bee.
inside classroom with a tube going outside.
So the question is, I need some help. So why does all this work? Right? All the people raise their hand. They raise their hand for every single scenario, right? And they're all successful overwintering. So why does it all work?
Preparation going in.
Prep going in, right? Is make sure they're healthy.
Bees do that in the wild.
If bees do that in the wild, they adapt, right?
Don't care.
Bees don't care.
Bugs in a box.
Bugs in a box. I think some of it they kind of know. They kind of know the size of the colony they've been in, and they sort of have set up their resources to survive in whatever size of colony they've been in. I think so. If the colony's been managed in a single for a bit, then it understands its space. And in the wild, it's equivalent of a single deep, right? So that's what Tom Seeley at least says, is that even though I heard someone make an argument against that recently, is like if you look at natural tree cavities, it's the equivalent of a 10 frame deep box, right? So, but it's in a tree, it's not in a hive, so it's insulated. But that's the space that they're generally occupying. Now, someone said, well, they're doing that because that's all that's available, because all new forests only have smaller trees on it. So maybe if you look 500 years ago with the old growth forest, they would have chosen bigger trees and had bigger cavities. I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought.
Or you can see what's in people's attics.
Or you can see, they'll fill up whatever size they want. They'll make huge colonies outside of a house. But I think it all depends on this bee to space ratio, right? If you have 3 frames of bees going into winter, you do not want that colony in a double deep box. That colony has no chance of surviving in the double deep box if it's 3 frames of bees. It's just going to freeze out. It's too much space. They're not going to be able to move around and access the food in there. So for those of you who have a double deep and you go in there and you see 3 or 4 frames of bees, I feel for you a little bit. That colony may not make it. But if you have 3 frames of bees in a single, it's probably going to make it, and it's definitely going to make it if it's in a nuke box for sure. So some of that is that bee to space ratio. So some of this gets into what do bees really need to survive the winter? They need a hive or a space to live. I don't think bees make it in hanging trees up in our neck of the woods. I think if they are hanging comb from a branch, they're probably not going to make the winter. So they need a hive. They need bees, right? The cluster has to have some size to it to survive the winter. There is I don't know what that is. Surely it doesn't have to be big. I generally like to see a minimum of 3 frames of bees to survive the winter. I think if it's less than that, I think it has struggled generating enough heat to keep it alive. Because they do have to generate, even in a small box, they have to generate heat to keep alive. And I think that 3 frame size bees is enough. So if you're going into your hive and you have 3 frames of bees, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And then they need some sort of carbohydrate resource, right? And this is all over the place, right? So some people say you need 80 pounds. Some people say you need 10 pounds. Some people, it sort of is all over the place. And people do it. The queen boxes have 10 pounds maybe of stores in them extra for the winter. And I anticipate 70% of those colonies are going to live. So in a small box with a small colony, you potentially can overwinter on a small amount of food. So it's all right. It's all, there's not, but you have to, if you're running a bigger box, hopefully you have a bigger colony, and that bigger colony needs more food. If you're running a smaller box, then you have a smaller colony with less food. Ultimately, everything comes out of winter and expands quickly in the spring, honestly. So some of this is a decision that you make, right? But there is no, what I've learned is like all of this works. So what are the essentials to make it work? I started beekeeping with screen bottom boards because that's how I was taught. I hate screen bottom boards now, honestly. And I don't say that strongly, but I do. Why do I hate screen bottom boards? Because they remind me of how lazy of a beekeeper I am, right? Because people that run screen bottom boards go out there and pull the bottom and and look at it and do diagnostics based on what's on the whiteboard. And they're very smart. You know what I do with my insert on the bottom? It just sits there and it collects hive beetle larvae because I don't pull it out and I don't empty it. So it just reminds you how lazy I'm a beekeeper. So for those of you who love to do that, pull this. Anyone love to do that? Who loves to do that? Ed loves to do that. Janet likes to. You pull that whiteboard and you say, "Oh, that's honey cappings. That's brood cappings. That's wax moth larvae poop, and that's go to it." I mean, but
George, you can tell what frames are uncapping where the brood is emerging just by looking at where those lines of wax cappings are.
you can't. You know what happens if you leave it in for 6 months and don't pull it out? Anyone else do that?
That's put an insert in or something.
It all looks the same. A bunch of little white maggots
Oh,
crawling around on the bottom of it.
Then are you using a solid? Because then
Yeah.
it's just sitting at the bottom of your hive.
You're sort of using a solid, but not really, because that flimsy whiteboard is not
No,
really.
if you're not using a screen bottom board, you're using a solid, then it's all sitting at the bottom of
No,
your
they clean it out.
The screen bottom, they can't access.
They can't
you
access
can't
it.
access it. Oh, yeah.
So the stuff falls underneath the screen and the bees can't get to it. Solid bottom boards are completely clean.
Yeah.
At least they should be. If you are running a solid bottom board and you have to agree on the solid bottom board, you got to go talk to Ed and get some of these hygienic bees because, bees generally make their bottom board clean.
That's right.
So.
Except during the winter.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the size of the colony, right? If you have a large colony, they'll keep that bottom board pretty clean in the winter. If you're running a single, if you're running a double and they're moving up, they're not going down to house clean. But if you run a single, they keep them pretty clean, honestly. So I switched to all solid bottom boards. I also run singles, so I like to keep my brood nest warmer in the spring. So I feel like since I'm always keeping my brood in the bottom box, I feel like that solid does a better job at preventing that bottom of those frames from getting chilled. So I've gone to all solids. I think the industry I think the beekeeper in itself have generally kind of gone more towards solids and away from screens over the last 5 or 10 years. But anyway, so I run solid. This is the most important piece of thing that you put on your hive for the winter is this thing right here. Don't raise your hand, okay? Because you're going to be embarrassing yourself. If you don't have this, you're doing something wrong, I think, honestly. I hate to say that, but you're really stressing out your bees if you don't have this at the top of your hive, right? It's so easy to do, right? You go to Home Depot, you get a board. Obviously, a table saw helps, but not essential. And you cut it up, and you just get the thick stuff, 2 inches, and you just put it right at the top of your hive. Ernie, do you have these on your nukes?
Yeah, I use that.
You use this.
Honeybee con board.
Which has insulation. So you have insulation at the top of your hive. I used to have 3/4 inch insulation, and now I've gone to 2 inch because I'm just convinced more is better. And ultimately, I think all outer covers, telescoping covers, should have insulation. I've noticed that my hives, and I leave this on year round now, so I don't have to think about where my insulation is. It's always on my hives. The bees chew through it. I need to figure that out. But
Cover it with that double
bubble wrap on it, yeah. But I think insulation at the top of hives is a wonderful idea. I think the colonies are less stressed. They look more productive all year long when you have insulation at the top. This is a must. If you don't have this on your hive, please put it on because you're just stressing your colony out if you don't have it on. So on whatever you have, whether or not you have a double deep, a deep and a medium, single deep, medium, some whatever, I have a shim above the box, an unscreened shim. Now, some people have screen shims, right? So they put a screen or they have a screen on the bottom of that. And the reason why that is because when they open up a hive, the bees aren't coming out at them, right? So they can sort of put their fondant or something on the screen without the bees coming out at them. It's a little bit it is a little harder for the bees to eat that fondant when it's not sitting directly on the frames when they have to work through a screen. But it's not the end of the world, right? Yes, George.
They don't fill it with comb in the spring either.
And they won't fill it with foam, right?
If you don't get that shim off early, it makes a mess.
Now, was someone else going to say something? I said, if I'm wrong, please just raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'm not afraid to admit that I'm wrong.
No, I just want to say if you break the seal this time of year, the bees can't get in there and seal it up again, so. You need to look, make sure it comes down solid. If it don't, put a piece of duct tape around it.
Yeah, you want to make sure that, you know, the propolis and stuff like that on the edges of the boxes when you put the shim on is sort of not causing any air gaps between your boxes or between this and this, because they're not going to seal it up at this point, right? It's getting a little too late to go out and forage for propolis. So so this is on all my hives. Now this is for me is a just in case, right? So it's a place for me to put emergency feed if I need it, right? So if I think my colony's running out of food and I don't want it to starve to death, I can put some sugar bricks or some fondant up in the space later on in the season. There's nothing wrong. If you're confident that your hive has plenty of food, you don't need the shim, honestly. You know, for me, the shim is not doing anything else but providing a space for me to put emergency feed if they run out of food in the winter. It's doing nothing else. So if you're confident on your hive weight, you don't need this shim. You don't need it unless you want to run. Now some people will put we talked about the thing. I'll get to you in a second, Howard, because otherwise I'll forget why else people use this shim. They'll make this shim. They'll put a screen on the bottom, and then they'll put all kinds of absorbing material in this space, right? So they'll put burlap or wool blankets or cedar chips or something like that to absorb moisture that's coming that the bees are generating through the winter. I think that's kind of fallen out of favor as a method because we generally think that some moisture in the hive is good in the winter because it allows bees to consume it and also take that moisture they consume and then be able to use that honey more effectively because they need to get some water to be able to use the honey stores through the winter. So you're probably not doing any harm if you're still doing a moisture box or anything like that, but I don't know if it's essential to overwintering your hive at all. Again, if you want to do it, I think. Yes.
So I put a 1/4-inch hole in the back of that shim, and then I do my oxalic acid vapor through that from the top.
Yeah, you can see this. All my shims used to have notches in it for top ventilation, and now none of my shims have notches in it for top ventilation. So I sort of don't have any notches in my shims, and I don't vaporize. But sure, if you want to vaporize and vaporize that way, and then put sort of do you plug it up or do you just leave it open? So Howard still has ventilation at the top of his hive.
1/4-inch hole to it.
It's small. I know it's small. I'm not saying. You can clearly run ventilation a lot. Again, that goes into what can overwinter a hive with some aeration coming out the top and without. They both can be successfully overwintered. But that's the other thing to do with this shim is to use it to trap moisture. So you basically have the shim, and then you have the insulation, and then you have your outer cover on it. You want to make sure, and I'm sure mine aren't, but you want to make sure, especially in the winter, that you have your hives tilted forward, because it's going to snow and the snow is going to melt. And the last thing you want is the melted snow to be kind of coming into the bottom board and a pool of water sitting on the bottom of your bottom board. So it's probably good if you're not sure, just put a little shim underneath the back of your hive and make sure it's tilted.
If you have a solid bottom board.
If you have a solid bottom board, I guess so. If you have a screen bottom board, it's just going to, it's going to go down onto the whiteboard and run out. Yeah. So yes, if you have a screen bottom board, it's not as essential. There are other things you can do in the winter, i.e. windbreak and hive wrap if you so choose. You can put hay bales, you can put burlap, you can do anything that keeps the wind from blowing on the hives, which is somewhat helpful. People wrap their hives in tar paper and black paper and insulation board and all that. You can do that too for the winter.
George, he's got some.
I've actually got tar paper in my car, a couple decent sized rolls, if anyone wants to take them or cut pieces off them. Just
He's got tar paper. One of the ex-presidents, Keith, wraps all his hives in tar paper. He says that it allows the bees to move around better in the hive to access the resources, but he's not running singles, he's running doubles. So I know when I'm running singles, the bees don't have any problem accessing the resources. Tar papers with Kevin.
Yeah.
So Kevin has a car somewhere.
I do have a car somewhere. I do have a car.
And he is
I
tar
love
paper.
driving.
When you wrap with tar paper, you just put one layer.
One layer.
Do whatever you want, Sheena. You can wrap it 3 times if you want.
Right? It's not insulation. I'm gonna wrap it like crazy this year.
It actually is absorbing the sunlight.
Right. It's not insulation.
Heat's theory is it's not insulation, but it absorbs the hot sunlight. It heats the hive up when the sun's out, which allows the bees to move around more effectively to access the resources that are in the hive, right? Because the cluster is sort of moving. If you're not running single, if my goal is just to have the cluster sit there. Honestly, I don't want the cluster to move at all. I just want them to sit there and be sharpened for 4 months. Honestly, I'm even tempted to cage the queen. Honestly, but that's another crazy sort of thing you guys don't want to hear about. I don't want my queen like. You know what's going to happen? It's going to be like 4 days in January where it's like 80 degrees, right? Because global warming. And then what's going to happen? The queen's going to start to lay. That's what's going to happen to my hives. The alarm's going to go off. We're going to run out of food because the queen decided that it wants to start laying in January instead of February. So I'm tempted to put the cage. I'm tempted to put that queen in a cage and let her out like when she should start laying.
I can't wait to hear in the spring what happens.
I haven't done it. All my queens are running free right now, but I'm tempted to put the queen in the cage.
If she starts laying in February, then you gotta break it open in February and try to get her out in the cold. Like, I don't understand how that works.
Don't worry about it. I'm still thinking it through. She'll be good.
I have a question over here. George?
Yes.
I thought in a colony, it's not the queen that decides when to lay, it's a colony.
Something, right? There's the colony to decide. Well, if the queen can't lay, the colony can decide whatever they want, and it's not going to
You
happen.
trust the colony?
Well, I don't trust the colony because I don't trust the weather.
Okay, so if they're good, you don't trust the weather, but if you trust how you're storing the bees to keep them surviving, don't you trust the colony that's surviving there to tell the queen when to lay?
I mean, this is
I've never
a good.
taken over the queen's job.
Yeah, no, and I send these crazy ideas to Ed sometimes, and Ed says, you know, George, this ain't worth thinking about. I said, thinking prevents Alzheimer's disease. But you're right. This whole philosophy of how much should the beekeeper intervene in their colony, right? And you have all different philosophies on that. To people that want to micromanage what's going on in their hive, i.e., caging the queen. You know, us doctorly like people who like to be in charge of things, right? You know, we want to cage the queen and we want to let the queen out on a certain day. So, and we have
George
people that
is 10 of 10.
I don't care. And then we have, and then we have, I do care. And then we have people that just, you know, feel like the colony should decide. If you want sustainable beekeeping, you need bees to be able to sustain and survive themselves without you intervening. There's truths to both sides of the question. I bring this up sort of tongue in cheek a little bit, but it's an idea that goes through my head a little bit. And you know, I'm running singles. And the reason why it does, I'm running singles and I have limited food resources in my hive. So the last thing I want is too much brood too early in the season and then run out of food. So what's one way I can control that? Just cage the queen. Let her out mid-February.
Feed your bees.
Can't we all laugh, right? I agree. I have been feeding bees this year, unfortunately. And I went over all that. Must-dos, 2 considers. You know, get your insulation on, remove your queen excluders, do your mouth guards, close your screen bottom boards, add fondant if really light, wrap your hives, duct tape. Thank you, Ernie, for saying duct tape, and dribble when broodless, which could be now.